Chris, voicemail.
All right. Let me know when you're ready, other Chris.
Go ahead.
Lindsay. Chris, really appreciate the time this afternoon. Again, I know we've been working closely with some of the other departments, yourself included. Obviously, things, it sounds like, are going pretty well with the enterprise cloud deployment, which really happy to hear about. Sounds like we're making some impact there. And in the process, some of the other conversations I've been having with other folks in the team, it sounds like you guys are engaging in somewhat of a business intelligence analytics project.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. So can you want to tell me a little bit more about that and kind of what's driving that?
Sure. So, as you know, we create these mobile applications. We sell them on the App Store. Gaming apps and GPS location apps, and we've got this new app, the health and fitness app, and so we're doing a fairly good job out there. We're selling quite a few, but I don't think we're doing a good enough job of analyzing all this data that we're ingesting from all these different sources to be able to maybe build better apps, get them out quicker, those type of things.
Yeah. I know they also, in discussion with the team, obviously, so you guys are kind of reaching this convergence of, the GPS data, social data, map data, and trying to figure out how to leverage that and, build out new revenue streams, things of that nature,
exactly.
right?
Yes, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so, have you guys made any progress on this today? Kind of like, where are you from a scale of 0 to we're finished?
Well, we've been doing our research. So, we looked at Cloudera for their distribution system, Hortonworks, and Pivotal HD a little bit. Trying to figure out, put this on commodity or maybe a shared storage platform. We looked at Isilon a little bit, but we're not sure about that. We have a lot of SQL DBAs in-house.
Sure.
So we're thinking that, we don't want to maybe hire new people if we can leverage our SQL experts for, running some intelligent queries. That would be useful as well. So starting slow and but want to build quickly.
Purely information gathering at this point. Nothing's been implemented. No infrastructure has been stood up.
That's correct.
Okay. So you mentioned that you've looked at a couple of distributions of Hadoop, right? And then you're kind of evaluating different platforms from a hardware perspective to support that way.
That's correct, yes.
So you've evaluated Isilon, which you have in-house today already, right? What other platforms have you evaluated?
Just sheer commodity.
Okay. What's the team's kind of thought process at this point? Is there are you leaning one way or the other?
You got pros and cons on both sides, and we're trying to look for somebody to help advise us and point us in the right direction.
Yeah, we could definitely
I think EMC can go both ways, right? Commodity based or shared storage. So we'd like to investigate both.
Yeah,
options.
Sure. Okay, so one other quick thing I want to ask you about before we kind of dive into that is from a sort of a data source perspective, right? We talked about the different types of data, the different applications that you have. I know, clearly you guys have a fair amount of unstructured data, no question there. Probably some structured as well, running off those VNXs. Are you guys doing anything with Object or any of those new apps that you've rolled out, coded to Object?
Yeah, we're creating buckets left and right, on our different platforms. So we have Object in our environment.
Okay.
Videos, we've got files that are object-based. Quite a bit of different media that we're storing in object data stores.
And is that due to the fact that it's just easier to manage from a data growth perspective, just managing object versus traversing file systems,
yes,
or is it a developer driven?
No, we're finding it is much easier to manage, and we do want to replicate it throughout throughout the country for that matter.
Okay. Okay, so what object platform from an infrastructure perspective are you using today?
What are we using right now? It's pretty much homegrown.
Pretty homegrown?
Yeah.
Okay, you using like OpenStack Swift or something like that?
Yeah, OpenStack Swift.
Okay. And I know we talked before about kind of the difference or where you draw the line from a decision-making process between looking at enterprise infrastructure, enterprise solutions, and kind of open source. I know that you personally in the past have seen value in cutting the time to market, like taking your developers and having them work on things that are actually like for the company that generate revenue, new applications, as opposed to like tinkering around with different open source projects to try to get something to work.
Absolutely.
Is that kind of the thought process
That
here?
is definitely, we want something enterprise, at least
Sure.
5 nines, geo, distributed, the
Okay.
whole bit. We
Yeah.
need to take this business to the next
Yeah,
level.
sure. So I'll draw a couple things real quick, and let me know if this rings a bell at all. So this is a really, really common thing, by the way. You guys are not like the only people that are experiencing this, but right. So you've got look familiar at all?
That does
Right.
look right, yeah,
Boom, that's a silo. That's a silo.
we're loading data from all those
It's a
different
silo, right?
locations we use.
And there's probably different mechanisms, different folks that have different expertise in terms of how the data is queried and quiesced and so on and so forth.
That is exactly how we're set up
Right.
now.
And obviously, right, so this is just internal, right? And now you guys are talking about adding in a social element as well, right? So maybe you're pulling in Twitter data, you're pulling in Facebook data.
We'd like to, yes.
There's obviously pulling in location data, right? And I know that you guys have an initiative to, not only source that data back to the end user to help them figure out hey, how should I plan my route to work today? But also how full is this parking garage? And all of these other applications, and then also selling that data back to other companies, business planners and city officials to say what route do people take, right? And where are they walking most often?
That would be
right.
great.
Right. So
new revenue streams would be generated.
Exactly. So our whole concept to tackle this challenge is to build what we're calling a data lake, right? So instead of having these different silos with their different analytic processes, we have a single. This is terrible. There we go. It's a little bit better, right? So. Right? Not exactly well distributed around the circle, but you get the idea. As opposed to having different data sources, so maybe some of the engineering data is on Isilon, and ops data is running off of the VNX, and you got some commodity handling various things. You got your OpenStack, Swift cluster, maybe that's handling marketing, right? So one of the issues fundamental here is that all that data is living in different places. And the ability, or rather, the issue comes in where you want to derive insights and comparisons from between data that's in the pool for marketing and data that's in the pool for sales and data that's in the pool for ops, and then bring the social data. And that's where this whole concept of Hadoop comes in, right? And so obviously you've been looking into that already. You've looked at a couple of the different distributions.
Mm-hmm.
So where EMC kind of plays here is in a couple of areas. So we'll start with the actual Hadoop distribution. We actually have our own distribution called Pivotal HD, which I think you mentioned that you've looked at. One of the key things that's very differentiated about Pivotal HD, when you look at comparing it to obviously Cloudera and Hortonworks are kind of the two big players, is we have this plugin to Pivotal HD called Hawk, which is very unique to our distribution and allows you to use the same SQL querying and SQL language that your developers and your folks are used to. Like you said, you have a lot of in-house expertise there, yet access this next-gen file structure of Hadoop, right? So you don't have to bring in a bunch of Hadoop experts and data scientists to come learn how to quiesce and query your data.
Great.
So that could be an advantage for you there.
Mm-hmm.
So then let's talk about building a data lake. The key tenet here is taking all of these disparate sources of data and pooling them into one giant lake, essentially. And that can be supported in a number of ways on EMC infrastructure. So you have Isilon already, right? So if your data was all file, I'd say great. Let's grow that Isilon cluster. You can start pumping all of your different data sources into that Isilon cluster. And Isilon has native HDFS capabilities. So it'll serve as the central repository for all of your source data. And then from that, you can stand up a compute cluster, purely compute, no storage, grow those two independently, right? And I'll get into that in a second why that's relevant.
Okay.
And that allows you to, to obviously access this one source of data and run Hadoop on top of all of these disparate types of data using the same query, right? So that's kind of one of the key areas where we're helping a lot of customers is sort of a consolidation. From a numbers perspective, one of the big advantages there, and you know that's about Isilon already, is because of OneFS and its unique proprietary protection mechanism. First of all, we get 80% storage utilization on average, so that's really huge. And you compare that to traditional Hadoop infrastructure that's built on commodity, you have to mirror the data 3 times. So if you have 300 terabytes of source data, you need almost a petabyte of storage, right? That's a lot of overhead, and at scale, that becomes a real big problem. So the way that I like to conceptualize it is, if you look at this as CPU, and this is storage, right? Like, there's almost no environment in the entire world where compute and storage grow linearly in a Hadoop environment. It just doesn't happen. Like, when people run into problems with Hadoop, they either have a math problem or they have a storage problem, right? Especially at scale. So, some people might be like this on the graph. Some people might be like this on the graph. The issue is, we want you to have to pay for only the amount of compute you need and only the amount of storage you need. But when you go with the direct attach model, not only are you paying that 3x overhead, but you're also being forced to scale the two linearly. So, if you have 500 terabytes of storage, right, in your direct attached storage Hadoop cluster, and you need to just scale compute, too bad, you're scaling storage as well. You have no choice. You're paying for disks that are going to not be utilized, and vice versa, right? So what we've seen is tremendous cost savings by consolidating into a data lake using something like Isilon. Now, you also mentioned that you have object storage, so that becomes kind of an interesting wrinkle here. So one of the technologies that we came to market with is something called Viper. And what Viper essentially is it operates in 2 levels in the environment. It operates on the control plane and also on the data plane. So in the control plane, it allows you to abstract the control for all different types of heterogeneous storage, including VNX and Isilon, as well as commodity, and then basically anything with an OpenStack standard driver. So the catalog of supported products is growing very rapidly. So what that allows us to do is aggregate from a management perspective all that different storage together. Then in the data path, it allows us to apply data services to that aggregated storage. So we can take an Isilon cluster or a VNX or commodity and layer on object storage services or Hadoop services or file services or block services, right? So what I would envision for you guys, and I think what would make sense is for us to carve out some time and chat with some of the folks perhaps over at Pivotal about the Pivotal HD, as well as obviously the infrastructure piece is, if you had something like Viper and Viper Data Services, you could wrap that on top of your existing Isilon and VNX investment, as well as your investment in OpenStack, and create a single access point for all those different types of storage, a single pool of storage that you can then serve up via HDFS to this compute cluster that you'll stand up, and in that way you'll really consolidate and streamline your workflow. You'll save an immense amount on cost because the majority of your file data will get served out of Isilon. Great utilization there from a storage perspective, and you don't have to mirror the data 3x anymore. And it allows you to scale the two independently, right? So does this all make sense, Chris?
It does, yes.
Okay. So I think, like I said, I think a good next step for us would be to grab some time at maybe the EBC Center over at Pivotal. The other piece that I think could be relevant for you is, just really quick, is as you guys know from the past project that we did around Enterprise Hybrid Cloud, Pivotal has a whole suite of products, one of them being Pivotal HD. They also have a team of specialists and data scientists, specifically around the big data space. And it's one thing to stand up the correct infrastructure and the right processes and systems to serve the data to the business units that are requesting it. It's a whole nother one to know what questions to ask, right? You kind of you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
and you don't know what questions to ask to derive the insights that you need. We have those expertise. So when it comes to fulfilling kind of this analytics project from top to bottom, we can give you the consulting services, the software, as well as the infrastructure, and bundle it all together to kind of deliver a turnkey solution to you. That'll save you significantly from a cost perspective versus a commodity kind of heterogeneous cobbling together play. And it's obviously enterprise because it's EMC.
Fantastic.
Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Great. So how's next week at 3 o'clock on Tuesday?
I'm open.
Great.